Hello, everybody. I'm Namita Thapar, Executive Director of MCure Pharmaceuticals. And on this episode, we are going to be talking about contraception. Some statistics to begin with. Modern contraception used by Indian couples is about 25% versus 80% used in developed countries. When you talk about condom usage, it's 6%. And when you talk about vasectomy, it's only 2%. This is the reason why we are talking about contraception, because there is a huge need to break taboos and to speak about it. So today we are here to shatter these myths, and we have our domain experts, Dr. Jaydeep Tank, Dr. Parikshit Tank, two awesome brothers who are going to talk about this for us. And then we have Dia and we have Praveen. So why don't we start with Dr. Jaydeep? Dr. Jaydeep, let's begin with what is contraception? Can you speak about contraception and the various options available?
I'm so happy that you began by talking about the taboos. And I'd like to speak a little bit about that. I think the taboo does not come only from the subject matter. It also comes from how the subject matter is portrayed in popular culture. Take the example of any movie in any language in our country. Whenever the man, be it a young man, an older man, goes to buy a packet of condoms, it's always shown as a very comedic moment. You see, so he goes, he's very bashful, he goes to the pharmacy, and then the pharmacist typically in a loud voice asks, "Kya chahiye?" And then there is typically a woman standing next to him and she's looking bashfully at him. And it's just so dramatic. And the problem with that really is that it reinforces the behavior that going to a pharmacy and asking for condoms is something to be ashamed of, when it's actually one of the most natural things that one can do. The second, as you very rightly said, is that shyness, particularly in those scenes on wedding nights, etc., is shown as a virtue.
Oh yeah, that too.
You see, and there is never a dialogue. It is just assumed that everybody knows what to do. And that's rather sad in a way, because it predisposes people not to have a dialogue, simply assuming that things will just work out when indeed it is necessary to have a dialogue. And this dialogue is particularly important about contraception, because at the end of the day, contraception should be a partner's issue rather than what we traditionally think is that it's a woman's issue.
Correct.
Pregnancy, reproductive health, contraception is somehow piled onto the woman as if it's only her sole responsibility, which is really sad. Contraception essentially are ways to prevent a pregnancy. And they are essentially divided into spacing, which means that they are temporary methods which will allow the woman to get pregnant when she wants, or the couple to get pregnant when she wants, or permanent, which means that after that they will be unable to conceive. So if you look at the spacing methods, the most popular ones are barrier methods like condoms. You have the intrauterine devices, and there are two kinds of those. There are ones like the copper T, which is popularly known as the loop, or there are the newer ones which are medicated, which are known as Mirena or the LNG intrauterine systems. And then of course you have your pills, and then you have injectables. So there is a wide variety of choices to choose from, and practically all of them can be customized for the woman and her partner. And then there are the permanent methods, for example, male sterilization, what was typically called nasbandi or vasectomy. And then there is female sterilization, which is tubal ligation, where the tubes of the woman are tied so that the sperm and the egg are unable to meet in the tube. Having said that, let me say that when you're talking about spacing methods, particularly for couples who are cohabiting together, condoms are generally not a great idea. They are not a great idea because the failure rate of condoms is very high. I tell a lot of my patients that, you can use condoms if you want, because they are easy to use, they are safe, they are inexpensive. However, use them only if you are willing to take the chances of failure. So they aren't really a very reliable method of contraception. If you're looking at reliable methods, then you should be looking at either intrauterine devices like the copper T or in the intrauterine system, or you should be looking at the oral contraceptive pills.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the questions I have is, when a woman comes to you and you give her this large range of choices that you just spoke about, how does she figure out what's best for her?
Well,
or him for that matter.
Sure. So to a certain extent, once the woman receives all the information about all the choices that are available, discuss the pros and cons of each choice, And then at the end of the day, ask her, what do you think you will be most comfortable with? There are patients, for example, who say that I don't want to have the headache of taking a pill every day. So I would rather do a method where I can, for example, insert an IUCD or an intrauterine device and be done with it for the next 5 years. There are other women who say that, well, I do have heavy periods. I do get pain during my periods. And for them, an oral contraceptive would be a great choice.
And I think one of the important points or words you use is dialogue.
Yes.
So, when a woman comes in, the doctor is speaking to her and discussing it, and then mutually figuring out what the best option is very important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Jaydeep.
I think that adds a lot to satisfaction in the long run.
Right.
Because contraception is not a one-off event.
Right.
It's something which the couple is going to use over a period of time.
Right.
So if it is a decision which has been thrust upon them,
Right.
that's not really going to play out very well over the next few years.
And the good thing is it's not irreversible. You can start with one and then shift to something else at some point, right?
There's complete freedom to change one's mind.
Right. You can try things and then figure out what's best for you.
Yeah.
And so, Dr. Parikshit, over to you. A lot of women get pregnant despite using contraception. Can you speak more on that?
One could look at, more effective methods and less effective methods. There's of course nothing like 100% method, but more effective methods would typically be things like permanent contraception or a sterilization operation, either for the man or the woman, where the chances would be less than 1 out of 100 every year.
Okay.
Or a pill or an intrauterine device, which are about 2 or 3 out of 100.
Correct.
And as we go down the spectrum, we come across the ones which are less effective. So that would typically be condoms, behavioral methods like withdrawal or coitus interruptus, which have like 20 to 40, depending on how regularly the couple adheres to the guidelines for that particular method.
Correct.
So it's a vast range, and we have the best results with the most effective methods which have been described.
I also want to add, you started the question by saying a lot of couples have a failure of contraception. And I think this is the biggest misconception.
Oh,
okay. Failures occur in two ways. One is what we call a user failure, and the other is what we call a method failure. And it is a very well-known fact that user failures far outstrip method failures.
Okay.
Alluding to what Parikshit was saying, that they have to use it properly.
Correct.
For example, if you're on pills and you forget taking pills for 3 days, well, naturally you're going to have a contraceptive failure. But then don't ascribe that failure to the method. That's a user failure.
That's very well said.
And
or more typically, if you're a man and you're, naturally careless and stupid, you'll forget to use a condom. No, we've come across enough in our practice. So just to emphasize that couples need to use a reliable method.
Yes.
Sometimes they rely on something called as emergency contraception.
Yes.
That means after sex has happened, they realize that, oh, we didn't use any contraception.
Right.
And then they take pills to prevent a pregnancy from happening. Well, yes, it is effective to a certain extent, but it's hardly anywhere close to what you would get with reliable methods.
Absolutely. So I think the word which he used, emergency contraception, to be used in an emergency.
Right.
That's not your regular method.
That's not,
it's not routine contraception.
I agree. I think that's very important to put out there. The other question I had for you, Dr. Parikshit, is something I am really very keen to know about, which is vasectomy, right? It is a much easier option, but only 2% of Indian men opt for this. Can you speak more on why that's the case?
You want me to go back to
the careless and stupid
unreliable
point?
and stupid? Okay, fine, I'll do that.
Please.
I think a lot is to do with how vasectomy is thought about by the man.
Right.
And the lack of counseling which goes into provision of the services.
Right.
So, one of the things which men are afraid of is that they lose their mardangi, so that machismo will go and it will interfere with sexual intercourse, which is hardly the case. I mean, there is absolutely no impact whatsoever on any aspect of sexual desire, performance, any of the biological parameters one would use to assess how sex was.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, this is a very prevailing myth which men have. And I feel very less is done to get rid of these myths.
Correct. With that, we move on to our two lovely guests for the day. Dia, why don't we start with you? Could you please tell us about your story, your journey?
I have two little daughters. When my elder daughter was born, so after the post-pregnancy, like every couple, they want to be in a good relationship. They want to like come back again in a good romantic mood.
Absolutely.
So my husband, he was not using any precautions. My daughter was around 4 months old, and I thought of like I started puking, and I used to feel giddy, and I thought maybe it's because of the breastfeed. So I asked my husband to bring a pregnancy test, and I checked it, and I was like that I'm
At 4
pregnant.
months, when your kid was 4 months old.
Yes.
Okay.
So, and I was like, no, this can't happen because I don't want early pregnancy after the first one, and I want to be careful. I want, like, that was my choice. So I just went for an abortion.
Okay.
And in that period, I used to ask my family members, like my mother-in-law, that I could take, because I used to see the ads and all that. I want to take some contraceptive pills and all. So they used to stop me to take that pills because no, your daughter is on breast milk, and you can't take such pills because it's not good for your daughter's health, and it's not even good for your health.
Okay.
So I had, because that's a myth, I guess.
Right.
So,
but you didn't know that at that point,
yes,
and you just believed them and listened to them.
Yes, because we have to listen to them. And then later on, I went to the doctor, and she like suggested me that what do you want to do with the pregnancy? I said no, I don't want to continue, and that was my choice. And then later on, she suggested me that you can go for copper tea, which is also very it's safe for you. And then later on, I had my good life, and it was a safe it was at the safer side.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So beautifully said, Dia, and straight from the heart.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much for sharing that. And now we move to Praveen. Praveen, आपने नसबंदी कराई है और आप एक एनजीओ के साथ काम कर रहे हैं, सम्यक, राइट, जो बहुत सारा अवेयरनेस करता है अराउंड वुमेन्स हेल्थ. प्लीज आप आपकी स्टोरी हमारे साथ शेयर कीजिए.
अच्छा, पहले तो मैं आप सबका मतलब शुक्रिया अदा करना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि पुरुष नसबंदी के बारे में यहाँ पर बात हो रही है. नसबंदी करवाने से पहले मुझे पता नहीं था इसके बारे में, लेकिन कुछ सुना था, कुछ पढ़ा था, कुछ लोगों से बातें की थी. मेरे पार्टनर से मैंने बात की थी कि जैसे ही हमें कोई बच्चा हो जाता है, एक ही बच्चा हम रखेंगे, बच्चा एक हो जाने के बाद हम नसबंदी करवा लेंगे. तो हमारे हमें लड़की ही चाहिए थी, और पहले लड़की हुई, और उसके बाद शायद कुछ 10 अक्टूबर 2017 को मैंने पुरुष नसबंदी का ऑपरेशन करवाया. बाद में जैसे ही घर में पता चला मेरे कि मैंने पुरुष नसबंदी करवाई, तो सबसे पहला मेरे ऊपर सवाल था, और मेरे से बातें शुरू हो गई कि नहीं, अभी तो तुम्हारा पूरा ख़त्म हो गया, सेक्सुअल लाइफ पूरा तुम्हारा ख़त्म हो गया अभी. तो मैंने सोचा यार ऐसे तो कुछ नहीं, हम दोनों मैं और मेरी पार्टनर जब भी बैठते थे, हम दोनों बातें करते थे, बात करते थे. लोगों की बातें सुनकर मुझे गुस्सा आता था, लेकिन जब हम दोनों बातें करते थे कि हमें हमारे सेक्सुअल रिलेशन के बारे में खुलकर पता था, क्योंकि वैसे तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है हमारे बीच में, उसे भी पता था और मुझे भी पता था. मेरे पुरुष नसबंदी ऑपरेशन करवाने के बाद अगर कुछ हमारे सेक्सुअल रिलेशन में कुछ अगर फ़र्क पड़ा है, तो ये मेरे साथ क्यों नहीं थी ना. हाँ, वो नहीं रहती, वो चली जाती, थोड़े दिन तक वो देखती है और चली जाती है. अगर उसको प्लेजर नहीं मिल रहा है, मुझे अगर प्लेजर नहीं मिल रहा है, तो पुरुष नसबंदी इतनी आसान है ना. उसका सेक्सुअल रिलेशन पर कोई उसका इम्पैक्ट हो जाता है ना. कोई जैसे औरत को अगर सर्जरी करवाई जाए उनकी, तो जितना उनको जिस क्या इसके गुजारना पड़ता है उनको, उससे तो पुरुषों को कोई नसबंदी के उस समय में कोई तकलीफ नहीं है उसमें. तो मुझे लगता है कि पुरुषों को पुरुष नसबंदी करवानी चाहिए.
फैंटास्टिक. और मुझे सबसे खास बात ये लगी कि आप थ्रू आउट जब आपका एक्सपीरियंस शेयर कर रहे थे, the words you kept using are मेरी partner. एंड आपने इतने ब्यूटिफुली एक्सप्लेन किया कि बेचारे वो पूरा प्रेगनेंसी डिलीवरी सब संभाल रही है, तो ये मैं क्यों कंट्रीब्यूट नहीं कर सकता हूँ. एंड द वे यू सेड दैट, आई थिंक दैट वाज वेरी यूनिक एंड वेरी वेरी ब्यूटिफुली सेड. थैंक यू सो मच प्रवीण.
जब औरतें ऑपरेशन करवाती हैं तो थोड़ा दर्द होता है, लेकिन जब मर्द ऑपरेशन करवाते हैं तो मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता.
Well, all I can say is that we're not just lovely but very filmy doctors here. Super, you know.
Namita, I also want to
Yes,
say one
please.
thing, and I think that we have so far been speaking about contraception in the medical context.
Yeah.
But let's also remember that contraception should be viewed through a women's right lens also. For me, contraception has actually been one of the most important tool for women emancipation.
Right.
You know, the freedom to choose when to get pregnant, the freedom to choose what to use not to get pregnant, and equally the freedom to have sexual pleasure without worrying for a pregnancy. I think these are all elements of contraception which elevate it beyond simply being a medical problem. You know, I look upon contraception not only as a medical issue, I look upon it as something which makes women live better, fuller and more healthy lives.
Absolutely. And you know, the real women emancipation will be like in your story, instead of the woman standing bashfully as the man asks for the condom at the chemist store, her demanding,
Absolutely.
let me know what are my options there. I'd like to pick and choose, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I think that would be true women emancipation. Thank you very much.
उजली इल्ली ने मन में ठाना है, बन के उड़ना है तितली.